Gunfire echoes across the shipyard. 7 armed pirates stormed the docks to steal million-dollar vessels. Automatic weapons, military precision. They've come to claim the luxury yachts and commercial boats for their smuggling operation. But old Welder Eddie doesn't drop his torch. He turns up the flame and walks straight toward the gunman. What happens next will burn into maritime history forever. You're about to witness what happens when the wrong pirates attack the wrong shipyard. Eddie Santos stands on the deck of a half-finished yacht, welding torch in hand, watching armed criminals destroy his workplace. 55 years old, 16 years at Brooklyn Marine Shipyard, the quietest welder on the waterfront. The pirates spread out across the shipyard. Secure the perimeter. This should be easy. Isolated industrial site, skeleton night crew. Valuable targets everywhere. Eddie steps off the yacht onto the dock. 42 seconds. That's all it takes to turn a piracy operation into a crematorium. First pirate never expects the welding torch to become a flamethrower. Eddie opens the acetylene valve full blast, creating a 6-foot flame that turns tactical gear into melting plastic. Pirate screams, drops his weapon, rolls into the harbor trying to extinguish himself. Eddie moves through his own shipyard like fire incarnate. Every crane, every dry dock, every piece of industrial equipment mapped in his memory from 16 years of methodical observation. Second pirate fires from behind a shipping container. But Eddie knows something the pirates don't. He's been modifying the shipyard's layout for more than just efficiency. Thermite charge. Hidden placement. Eddie's welding torch ignites a chemical reaction that cuts through the container's steel wall like butter. Pirate finds himself trapped in a metal coffin as molten steel pours around him. Third and fourth pirates realize they're not fighting a welder anymore. They're facing something that understands destruction at a molecular level. Eddie vanishes into the maze of ship hulls and industrial machinery, using every piece of metalworking equipment as a weapon. Plasma cutter becomes a precision blade. Angle grinder becomes a medieval weapon. Even his welding helmet becomes tactical advantage. Fifth pirate tries to flank around the dry dock. Eddie's waiting with an underwater cutting torch, designed to work beneath the surface, deadly effective above it. One burst of superheated flame, instant neutralization. Sixth pirate, panicking, sprays bullets across the shipyard. Eddie rolls behind a steel bulkhead, emerges with equipment the pirate has never seen before. Military-grade explosive charges, disposal tools, devices that don't belong in civilian shipyards. Controlled detonation, precise placement. The shipping crane collapses exactly where Eddie calculated, crushing the gunman beneath tons of steel. Seventh pirate, the leader, finally understands what he's facing. This isn't a welder. He screams. It's a goddamn bomb tech. But Eddie is already moving. The harbor around them is filled with fuel lines, oxygen tanks, and industrial chemicals. In the hands of someone who understands explosive ordnance, the entire shipyard becomes a weapon. Eddie activates a fuel line valve, creating a pressurized gas leak, then ignites it with his welding torch. The explosion that follows lights up Brooklyn Harbor like the 4th of July. When the flames clear, the pirate leader finds himself surrounded by burning wreckage, facing a man whose eyes hold the cold precision of someone who's defused bombs under enemy fire. Please, man, I surrender. Don't burn me alive. Eddie considers this for exactly 1 second, then demonstrates why Navy Yard specialists understand both creation and destruction. Thermite charge, precisely placed. The leader's weapon melts in his hands as Eddie shows him exactly what 16 years of hiding his skills has cost the criminal underworld. 7 armed pirates. 42 seconds. 0 survivors who can testify. Eddie stands in his burning shipyard, welding torch still glowing, breathing normally, like he just finished a routine repair job instead of conducting industrial warfare. He walks to the shipyard office, picks up the phone. Harbor Patrol, this is Eddie Santos at Brooklyn Marine. Had some pirates try to steal our boats. Won't be a problem anymore. You might want to bring fire trucks. But this story didn't start 42 seconds ago. It started 21 years earlier, the day Petty Officer First Class Eduardo Eddie Santos, Navy Yard, finished his final deployment and applied for civilian welding certification. For 18 years, Eddie had served as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist with the Navy's most dangerous units. He defused bombs in hostile waters, cleared underwater mines, and disposed of enemy ordnance in conditions that killed specialists with less training. But Eddie hadn't just diffused explosives. When our teams needed someone who could create controlled destruction for tactical advantage, Eddie had volunteered for missions that officially never happened. He'd used industrial chemicals to breach enemy positions, employed welding equipment for sabotage operations, created explosive devices from civilian materials when military ordnance wasn't available. 21 years ago, Eddie had wanted peace, the satisfaction of building boats instead of destroying targets, honest work that created transportation instead of eliminating threats. Brooklyn Marine Shipyard offered exactly that opportunity. For 16 years, Eddie had been a perfect employee, skilled, reliable, never asked questions about overtime or dangerous jobs, welded hulls with precision that impressed supervisors who never wondered why he was so good with industrial equipment. What they didn't know was that Eddie had spent his first year studying every piece of equipment, every chemical storage, every potential explosive device in the shipyard. Old habits from a career where such knowledge meant mission success. Eddie had built himself a civilian identity as complete as any cover operation. Until tonight. Back to the present. Coast Guard cutters arriving at what looks like a war zone. Fire trucks battling industrial blazes. FBI agents trying to understand what happened. Shipyard foreman Mike O'Brien emerges from the office where he'd hidden during the attack. "Eddie," he says, staring at the burning wreckage, "what the hell did you do?" Eddie secures his welding equipment, each movement precise and controlled. "Protected our boats from pirates who wanted to steal them." This wasn't protection, this was industrial demolition. For 16 years, Eddie has avoided this conversation. For 16 years, he successfully separated his Navy-odd past from his civilian welding present. But there's no separating them now. Navy-odd, he says simply. Explosive ordnance disposal. 18 years. Underwater demolitions. The words hit the dock like depth charges. O'Brien stares at him. "You're telling me that for 16 years, Brooklyn Marine has had a Navy bomb tech welding our boats?" "Former bomb tech," Eddie corrects. "I'm a welder now. I build things instead of blow them up." "But what you did tonight." Eddie looks at the shipyard where he spent 16 years learning to create instead of destroy, to build vessels instead of eliminate threats. Tonight forced him to remember that sometimes the best way to protect what you've built is to destroy what threatens it. Some knowledge never leaves you, even when you want it to. Coast Guard Commander Sarah Torres arrives to investigate what appears to be the most unusual piracy incident in maritime history. The 7 pirates are identified as members of an international criminal organization that had been targeting shipyards and marinas to steal vessels for smuggling operations. They'd researched Brooklyn Marine security, staffing patterns, and valuable inventory. They'd planned for law enforcement response, alarm systems, and civilian resistance. They hadn't planned for encountering someone who understood both shipbuilding and explosive ordnance disposal. "Mr. Santos," Commander Torres says, "your response was unlike anything we've seen. Where did you learn to use welding equipment for tactical purposes?" Eddie inspects a yacht hull that survived the explosions, checking for structural damage. "In OD, you learn that every tool has multiple applications. Welding equipment can build boats or eliminate threats. The difference is in how you choose to use the knowledge." Young welder Jake approaches hesitantly. He'd worked alongside Eddie for 2 years, never suspecting his colleague's background. "Eddie, how did you know exactly what to do? How did you turn the whole shipyard into a weapon?" Eddie looks at the young welder who reminds him of himself decades ago, dedicated to metalwork, unprepared for the reality that sometimes builders must fight to protect their creations. "In my previous job, I learned that protecting what you build sometimes requires destroying what threatens it. The skills aren't different, the purpose is." 3 weeks later, Eddie makes a decision that changes his career. He begins working with maritime security agencies, teaching them how shipyard knowledge can be used for port security. The work allows him to use his odd expertise without returning to active military service. He keeps his position at Brooklyn Marine, but he no longer feels the need to completely separate his Navy experience from his civilian welding work. Word spreads through the maritime security community. Brooklyn Marine becomes known as the most secure shipyard on the East Coast, not just because of technology, but because everyone knows Eddie Santos is watching the boats. The ghost of the welding bay revealed himself to be something far more substantial than anyone imagined. A guardian who'd been hiding in plain sight, protecting civilian vessels one weld at a time. The yacht owners who store their boats at Brooklyn Marine never forgot. They continue using the shipyard specifically because they know Eddie's protecting their investments. Not because they owe him, but because they understand what his presence represents. Local news covers the story. Welder stops pirate raid. But Eddie declines all interviews. He's not interested in fame. He's interested in the next hull to weld, the next boat to repair, the next opportunity to serve the maritime community with skills earned in military service. Because that's who Eddie Santos chose to become. Not a warrior, not a destroyer, just a welder who happens to possess knowledge that saved boats when pirates threatened his harbor. Shipyard workers sleep better knowing Eddie's watching over their workplace. Boat owners sail more confidently knowing their vessels are maintained by someone who understands both construction and destruction. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose industrial expertise seemed to extend beyond their job requirements? Someone whose competence suggested training they couldn't discuss? Share their story in the comments, because sometimes the most powerful protection comes from those who've chosen creation but never forgotten how to wage precise destruction. Thank you for watching. If this moved you, subscribe and help us honor the quiet guardians who protect our waterways. These are the people who remind us that heroes don't always wear naval uniforms. Sometimes they wear welding masks and smell like metal shavings, until the moment their shipyard needs them to be something more. And remember, the next time you see a welder whose work seems too precise, whose knowledge seems too complete, whose calm under pressure seems unnatural, you might be trusting your boat to someone whose training included lessons about more than just metal work, but who chose to use that training to keep vessels safe on the water, one weld at a time.